So anyway, good morning, everybody. It's wonderful to see all your smiling faces, wonderful friends. Such a unity, such a bond, such a wonderful thing to meet so many wonderful people. Good begets good, and you just feel it, and it's just a wonderful blessing to be a part of all of you, and to learn and be taught and educated. Yesterday, I have to say that I reconsidered some of my thoughts, my own thoughts about things that I was corrected on. Paul taught me some things and some of the things that he had to say, and I thought, it's a wonderful thing to not be so hard-headed in our thoughts, whether they be political or otherwise, to really consider things that we haven't considered to see how that might affect others. Sometimes we get caught up in our own circles of influence, and we think what's best for us is the way to go, when in reality, what's best is the ripple effect is far and wide for everyone. Isn't that what really gratifies and makes us better, is to help and serve others in a sincere way and not for self-gratification or reward or identification, and sometimes not even money. My wife tells me that stop thinking ROI. Stop thinking ROI. There's more to life than ROI. Well, ROI can be measured in a lot of different ways. So I'd like to start out this morning. I don't mean to be redundant, but it's always worth another shot. Years ago, I was in Montana, and I had a automobile with a Wyoming license plate. And back in those days, it was full-service gasoline, so you pull in and get gas. And this young 14-year-old was told to do certain things, including wash your windshield, check the fluids, check your air pressure. Remember those days? I used to work at one on the Las Vegas Strip where I grew up, where the RE is, City Center, at a Gulf gas station. So I got to be pretty good at that. So I pulled in this gas station, and this 14-year-old, it's first day kind of a thing. I give him a credit card, and he's back there writing my license plate number down. And I'm in a hurry, and after about the third or fourth time of him tearing up the invoice and trying again, I got out to see if I could assist him. And I said, "Can I help you?" And he looks at my license plate, that Wyoming plate, and he says, "Mister, I can't draw that horse." He's trying to get that cowboy hat on that horse. No, you just have to write down the numbers in the state and you'll be good to go. So for those of you that are from the east that are out here in Idaho and Wyoming, you'll see those plates, and I thought I might share that with you. So I'd like now to introduce our next moderator, Chad Olson. Chad happens to be one of my dearest friends for 30 years, and we'll ask him to come to the stage, and we'll turn that time over to him.
That was a great bash last night, wasn't it? Kind of hard to get up and get going this morning, but that was awesome. We have a great little panel today where we're going to talk about cybersecurity and AI, and for Scott's sake, AI refers to artificial intelligence. So we have two panelists that will be with us today, and you're welcome to come on up, but we've got James Lucier, and we also have Howard Getson. So if you're as old as I am, you remember George Jetson. It's not Jetson, it's Getson, okay? So come on up, and because we only have the two panelists, what I think we'll do is we'll start off, and rather than jumping into kind of panel discussions or questions, I'm going to give them each an opportunity to spend 15 or 20 minutes to either come up here or from your seat, whatever you would prefer, and we'll go ahead and allow them to give us a presentation and a statement, and I think this will be really enjoyable and fun. They're both business-minded individuals, and so they're going to make sure that they take the spin on this to help us as individuals and business people understand how cybersecurity and AI can affect us and will affect us, and it's one of the most to me, frightening things as I think about China and Russia and the race for, control of AI. So this will be an interesting discussion. So maybe we'll start, Howard, with you, if that's okay. But before, let me give you a background of bio. Let me properly introduce Howard. He's the founder and CEO of it's not Logix, it's Logix, okay. And it's an AI trading systems company that essentially provides its users with hedge fund in a box. Prior to Capitalogix, Howard was active in corporate legal practice, which he worked from 1987 to 1993. Howard has a passion for helping people define purposes in their life and presented the time value of life worth living. Howard attended Duke University, where he earned his undergraduate in philosophy and psychology. He also obtained both an MBA and a JD from Northwestern University. So let's turn some time over to Howard.
So most of the people in this room have enough gray hair that if you look back on your career and you tried to figure out how to tell the story, it makes a whole lot of sense going from now backwards. You can draw the thread. But if you looked at it from the beginning, didn't almost everything you do seem random, and a whole bunch of things that you thought were terrible turned out to be some of the best things that happened? I've now got a platform that's 100% autonomous AI that runs hedge funds. And I was talking to a young person in our intern program, and they said, "How did you get started?" And the interesting thing is I didn't really know. But I actually think it started when I was 2. And the reason is I told my mom that the nanny was hitting me and my brother and was locking me in the basement. My mom slapped me and told me, "You're not allowed to lie." And 2 weeks later, my brother died. And over the course of my life, there have been a number of events like that where the meat suit that we carry around gets distracted by fear, by greed, by discretionary mistakes. And I really wish that I could find a way to help make better decisions. I think it's why I was a psychology and philosophy major. But really my whole life, my whole career has been about thinking about how people make better decisions. How do you know something? What is truth? What is real? And I realize that's a heady way to start a presentation like this. But the truth is, AI is at a tipping point. The CEO of Google recently said he thinks that AI is going to become as important to humanity in our future as fire. I've said for years that I look at what's happening with AI as the same as the invention of electricity or the internet. It's going to change everything and in ways you never thought. So my presentation is going to be pretty quick. I'm going to go through stuff fast, but it's in 2 stages. The first is I'm going to show you a little bit about how I think about AI in my business. And then the second part is I'm going to give you a framework that I use to predict or imagine the future. And I think you're going to find that this presentation relates to you even if you're a real estate person or somebody that sells airplanes. So I just wrote a book called Next on Wall Street. It's not out yet. It's finished. I just have to finish editing it. And I'm actually going to have Alan help me with it a little bit. But I call it the new world of trading. And the reason is the old world of trading is people traded against people. Markets represented the collective fear and greed of populations, and even chart patterns could be looked at from a psychological perspective. An ascending triangle was kind of an arm wrestling match between the bulls and the bears. But then something happened. In the new world of trading, computers got involved. Trading's all about finding asymmetric advantage, okay? And a lot of times it's an information asymmetry. And computers gave people a huge edge. And you've heard of high frequency trading. It's a rush to be the fastest. But the new world of trading is where we don't trade against people. We don't even really trade against machines. We're trading against AI. And I'll give you a statistic later, but I'll pre-frame it for you. 99% of trading is now electronic. 70% is algorithmic. But the algorithms are basically like a light switch. It's on or off pretty much, really simplistic. Less than 2% of trading is done by AI. But if you came back in 5 years, that number is going to be way, way higher. And if you came back in 10 years, it's going to be 70%. And if you came back in 20 years, it's going to be 99%. But the same is going to be true in your business as well. Biggest problem in the market is too much information. Everybody thinks if they just had a little bit more, but really it's signal versus noise. There's so much stuff, you can hear whatever you want to hear. The next problem is, if something's been done the same way for, let's say, 6 months or longer, chances are it's not being done right, because the practical realities of time, technology, and what's possible mean that you can upgrade. But so many businesses are built for the way that it used to be done. I'm going to tell you, you guys out here understand the law of the farm, right? Winter, spring, summer, and fall. Almost everybody would agree it's springtime for AI. But not for you if you don't plant. It doesn't matter that it could grow. Right now is when you have to start thinking about what's possible. Not because you're going to be good at it. You're going to suck at it. You're going to find that it's really hard to achieve what you want to achieve. It's really easy to think grand thoughts, but there's this giant trough of disillusionment when you realize how hard it is to actually do certain things. But once you get past that, AI is now good enough to do almost anything. It's not good enough to do everything. It's not a general intelligence, but we can make it do almost anything. So the new paradigm, I call it 23-second trading. When my dad first got stock, it was on his wedding day. And I remember it was the affiliated fund, a blue chip fund, and I know because he owned it when he died. If you were to look at every transaction on the New York Stock Exchange over the last year, and you looked at when they bought, when they sold, you have humans who buy, hedge funds who buy, high-frequency trading firms. The average amount of time between a purchase and sale is 23 seconds. Now, you may shake your head and go, that doesn't matter to me. But what if it could? The reason it doesn't matter to you is you don't have the ability to ingest that data, learn from it, and figure out what it's telling you. But some people do. And it's changing everything. The same is true in your business. Most people think AI is going to help me predict the market. We don't use AI to predict the markets. We use AI to do a lot of things, but not that. But in your business, it might be to figure out which customer segment is most profitable, or how to reduce the cost of goods sold, or if you're going to release this product, should you release this other product or take this other product off the market? It's about portfolio construction, risk management. There's so many different things you can use it for. I make a joke. The old style of trading is dead. Luckily for us, not all the old traders are. This is true in almost every business. I was talking to an older portfolio manager last night, somebody who actually spoke here. And one of the things that was so cool is they recognized that they made most of their money when they were doing something a little bit different than everybody else. If you do the same thing with the same data as other people, you don't have an edge. But if you can find a way to have new or different information and to actually come at the problem a different way, and in AI they call it dimensionality, you can do some really interesting things. And what AI is really going to do is help you come up with new and better products faster. So let me tell you a teeny bit about trading. humans have a genetic, biological, hard-coded imperative to reproduce, to spread your seed. It's the only way your line continues. Evolutionarily, you will find that that is just true. Markets exist to trade. It's really weird, but if you understand, markets exist to trade. The only way anybody gets paid is if there are more trades. Things are growing or dying. The regulator gets paid, the auditor gets paid, the broker gets paid, the trader gets paid, even the person buying and selling, it's all trades. So understand that this is a function that causes them, it's a force of nature. It's not one I can change, it's one I have to understand its playing field. In order for there to be more trades in the same amount of time, they have to get shorter and shorter. It's the only way that you're going to have more and more things. But every trade is the result of a disagreement. Somebody thinks it's going to go up, somebody thinks it's going to go down. In selling, you've heard an undisturbed prospect doesn't buy. Well, in trading, an undisturbed person doesn't buy or sell. And so confusion is the actual engine that the market uses to produce trades. Doesn't it make sense? If you want to have more trades, there has to be more confusing information because somebody has to look and go, I am confident, I want out. Somebody else has to confidently say, I want in. Okay. Well, then the only thing that you can really predict about the market is that there's going to be increased volatility and noise. But if you know this, you can build models that exploit that. This is fundamentally true. Meanwhile, you can't predict random. So to me, markets are random to me. Even though I see patterns, I can't tell what order the patterns are going to come because I'm not Trump. So when I tweet, things don't happen the way it did for him. But I'm also not Kim Jong-un. I didn't create the global pandemic. I didn't invent the snowpocalypse. There are things that happen that cause enough randomness that why spend even $1 trying to predict random? So you could give up and say, well, then you can't use AI in markets. That's wrong. Here's a business truism. Focus on the thing that doesn't change, not all the things that do. So as a hedge fund manager, markets are always going to change. So is the algorithm that's going to be the best. So I can't focus on that. That's simply raw data coming in. Those are sensors in a network. But if I figure out what's filling my cup or draining my cup, and I get better at doing that faster, that's something that doesn't have to change. The market or the technique that's filling it is going to change, but my ability to measure what's actually showing me we're moving in the right direction can be fixed. So with AI, you actually have to figure out what capability do you really want to call into existence. And so the way I would say that is, if you don't know what your edge is, you don't have one. It's just as true in any business. What's your edge? So this is tongue-in-cheek, but only invest in something while it's working. The goal of our AI is not to predict something. It's to know something faster. And if I know something faster, I can take definitive action while other people are taking tentative action. Doesn't that sound like business advice? Yeah. Well, this is how you're going to use AI in your business too, right? The truth is, in the new world, and I'll say of economics, data is the precious commodity. And it really is a lot like crude oil because you have to figure out where the data exists. You have to pump it. You have to refine it. You have to figure out what you're going to use it for. And you have to figure out how to deliver it where it needs to go fast enough so that it's useful. So welcome to the new world of finance. It's not Jackson Hole, Wyoming. It's not Dallas, Texas. It's not New York City. It's the data center. But the same is going to be true in your business. If you have the right tool, it's easy to do the right job. In AI, it's really about bringing order to chaos and then finding finer distinctions because that's where wisdom comes from, right? AI is cool, but artificial stupidity is scary. And that's how come, by the way, you can't make mistakes at light speed. That's really dangerous. That's why the heartbeat of AI is still human. Mediocrity is incredibly expensive. That's how come you see so many people. I've spent $40 million building our platform. And I've done it in slow motion because I understand that this is a long game, but the stakes are big. It's an elegant use of brute force, and it's really about more ways to win. So now, in the second part of this, I really want to show you how you can imagine this. And it says text BBC to 972-992-1100. That will get you the presentation, including the forms that I'm going to share with you. But it'll also get you my weekly link list, where it's the cool stuff that I see about technology and business. And it never sells anything, but it's a really good newsletter. All right, so we've now switched to the second part. This is going to apply directly to your business. I'm going to teach you a framework. I think it's going to be good. So have you ever noticed that if you buy a red Tesla, then you see a red Tesla everywhere? It's like, even though you didn't see them before, all of a sudden you see it everywhere. Well, one day I was thinking, what do you think started Tesla? I mean, it didn't just become Tesla. Every single process has a beginning, a middle, and an end. There was something that was the first idea. And I believe that it's always a capability. So maybe it was the idea for clean energy. Maybe it was the battery. Maybe it doesn't matter what it was. Something was the initial capability. And then somebody said, well, what can you do with it? So I'm going to speed up by showing you the framework. Let's assume it was the electronic engine. Imagine that you're Elon Musk. Somebody says, hey, I've got this electronic engine and I think it's going to be cool. The first thing he's going to do is throw shade and say, yeah, but what can it power? I mean, and what he's saying is it needs to do more. The first thing you're going to do is figure out the key capabilities and the constraints, okay? But when something satisfies your need, it doesn't satisfy your desire. It actually makes you hungry for more. So think about each capability as a little Lego. And as soon as you've got this Lego, the first time you as a person see a new capability, it's called so what, who cares? If it doesn't help you do what you already do better, so what, who cares? It's over. But if it does do that, you get greedy and you think, what else could it do? Or what else should I do? So could or should, right? And so now you start to stack the capabilities. And in the 80-20 rule, this is the 20% of stuff that gets 80% of the initial benefit. So we call that a prototype. So now imagine you're Elon Musk. You're standing at a test track, and the scientist has what looks like one of those golf carts running with the engine. And he's like, look, we're going to be able to have a car. And the first thing Elon's going to say is, does it go 300 miles? Because if it doesn't go 300 miles, nobody's going to buy it, right? I mean, the constraint is the first thing you think about. Now, the reason I'm telling you this is this framework that I'm about to show you is capability, prototype, product, and then platform. Each one is a massive scaling opportunity. And the trick is to do this for your industry, not your company. You want to figure out a map before you're lost in the woods. If you understand the capabilities that people are going to want, you can understand where money's going to flow, and then you can say, this is the natural path. I want to build this along that path so that you're taking advantage of nature rather than fighting it. So the product was an affordable mass market vehicle. Don't you know they needed charging stations everywhere? Because if you ran out of gas in Iowa in a cornfield, nobody would buy it. And it had to work in every state, because if Nevada said you couldn't drive in Nevada, it would fail. So the constraints actually show you the capabilities that are needed. This isn't about predicting technology. This is about predicting what human nature is going to desire. And then the platform is this new, not only Tesla series of cars, he's created an energy company. The power company is going to be worth more than the car company. And then the ability to update the cars over the internet is something he's going to sell to every other car company so that they can update a car the same way your iPhone updates apps. And what you realize is what used to be a product becomes the prototype for the next level. And so start to think about how this is going to work in your industry. I'll show you the same thing in SpaceX, and I'll do it much faster. The initial capability was to win the X Prize, which was to take off, hit space, and be able to land and reuse the rocket. But very quickly it got to, I want to democratize space travel. Right now he's privatized space travel where he can bring something into space for 1/20th the cost that it used to cost. Well, that means that a whole bunch of other entrepreneurs are going to say, wait, I can do business in space. But now SpaceX's business isn't going to be to take you as a human on space travel. They're going to be the UPS or FedEx of creating new worlds. And then Starlink, the ability to communicate via satellite, is going to be the AT&T between universes. And you realize that the capability is something that you yourself look at and say, does it matter? The prototype is you and your team, people you know, doing something you know. The product is when people you don't know accomplish the thing you know. And the platform is when people you don't know do stuff with it that you never anticipated, and that's where the real money comes in. So as you think about your industry, what's going to be the next level of product and what's the next level of platform, then you think about your own unique ability, the stuff where you have superior skill, but where you also get energy, and you say, what should I build and where should I place it so that when those people come through, they say thank you. Again, people rarely try to accomplish what they don't believe is possible. This is where you start to think about what's possible. And actually, as an entrepreneur, I've always considered my job to make the impossible possible, to make the things that are possible likely, to take the things that are likely and make them inevitable, and take the things that are inevitable and just do them, right? So once you understand this map, you don't have to predict the future. You don't have to invent the best technology. By the way, human nature hasn't changed forever. We've been confronted with new capabilities from the beginning of time, right? Fire good, wheel good, fire wheel no good. Even though we're always going to be confronted with new technology, it's really about the capabilities and the greediness for next. So now that you understand it, so what, who cares is about the new capability. What's next is the what could I do or should I do. The product is how can it be good enough that people you don't know can accomplish the thing that you're looking at. And then the transformation, it changes the game that other people play. It literally changes the playing field. And it's where people you don't know do things that you don't anticipate. So in my own business, I could tell you how I did it, but ultimately, we got to a point where I had a fund run by autonomous AI. And literally, it changes the economics of our business hugely. I can run our business for less than $5 million a year, actual real cost. I can't think of a corresponding hedge fund in New York that doesn't pay one partner in their firm that. I can release a new product in a matter of hours or days that would take them months or quarters. It's changing the way the game is played, okay? But here's the thing that happened to me. I realized that I had artificially constrained our business because I continued to apply it to the thing that I wanted to apply it to. And in a sense, I think about the engine that I created as a financial product generator, something that can create a new fund, a new ETF, a new financial product, an insurance wrap product. But really, I invented this series of equations, algorithms, automations, validations, testing tools, all those things that are so boring. I called it an insight engine. But the thing it was a way to amplify intelligence. The noun, the insight engine, verbs something. And the verb was amplified intelligence. What people want is to make better decisions, take smarter actions, and continually improve performance. So then the idea was, why not make that platform create products in many industries? And now all of a sudden, the economics are different. So I'm challenging you to do that for yourself. Think about your industry. think about the long-term map of what you believe the next generation of products and platforms are going to be, and then figure out how you can take advantage of that. Because your imagination's your ultimate competitive advantage. I've got that form that'll help you. You can do anything you commit to, so be careful what you commit to. And I hope that helps. That's the book that's going to come out next summer. And 972-992-1100, just text BBC. We'll get you all of this plus the newsletter. I hope that gave you a sense of what's going on. And
thank you, Howard. Our next participant is James Lucier, and he's the managing director of Capital Alpha Partners, where he leads energy and environmental practice. James provides predictive, insightful analysis of trends in Washington energy and climate policy for an array of clients, including managers, private equity investors, commodity traders, and investment bankers. His fields of expertise are domestic U.S. energy production, alternative energy, infrastructure, and electric power, especially as they are impacted by regulations, litigation, and the U.S. political cycle. And before co-founding Capital Alpha Partners in 2007, James was a senior vice president of Prudential Equity Group, where for 9 years he was a member of Prudential's well-known Washington Strategy Group of equity research firms covering oil, gas, and power, utilities, and industrials. He's a graduate of Princeton University, and let's turn some time over to you.
Well, good morning, everyone. Wasn't Paul McCulley great yesterday? I used to be a speech coach, and I wish I had a video of that talk, because he did what I used to teach my freshman students at Princeton in the speech program, which was you always have to pace yourself and take long breaks. Either you can be intense and animated and really fast, the way Paul was, or you can do what I usually tend to do, which is be slow, mellow, kind of soft. But the key thing is taking the breaks and getting the cadence down, and Paul is the poster child for doing it right. I was just blown away. Now I'm going to do something totally different. I had come to do a really geeky, boring technical talk on cybersecurity and computer issues with gas pipelines and the power grid and things like that, because that is what I do for a living. But frankly, that would be totally out of place here. This is a group of business owners, right? You're all business owners? Well, we're going to go straight to the bottom line. And the bottom line is this. What would you do right now if on your cell phone you got a text message that says that you have been hacked? You know, this is Weevil from Russia and the ransomware has taken effect. Or if you got an email or call. Who are you going to call? Ghostbusters? Cryptobusters? You got to have a plan to deal with this. And it's critically urgent right now because we've been here for 2 days now. We've had a tent full of economists talking about working from home. Oh, and it's a problem for productivity. It's a problem for the workforce. It may lead to wage inflation. Nobody wants to go back to work. I personally don't want to go back to work. All of that stuff. And we've missed the major point because, as John Sylvia warned us yesterday, you run into trouble when you always focus on one thing, and it's especially a problem when you focus on the wrong thing. The right thing to focus on for purposes of my talk is that working from home has been a cybersecurity disaster. Everybody is doing crazy stuff, sensitive corporate business on open, unsecured networks. If you're in the securities industry and you have compliance issues and you've been doing stuff on your home computer, you know, when I worked on Wall Street, that was a big, big no-no, and it still should be. And in fact, the situation has gotten so desperate, so urgent, that the U.S. federal government, always at the ready, just put up a website. Cole, could we have that website, please? StopRansomware.gov just went live yesterday. Very important. Write it down. One-stop shopping. You don't even need to listen to me anymore, but this has got great checklists for what you as a business owner and a CEO and a board member need to do to make sure that you are ready for a ransomware attack, to make sure that you can respond to a ransomware attack, and to make sure that you can recover your business afterward. Now, the reason I am giving up what was going to be a geeky technology-oriented talk is that this is not a technology issue fundamentally. This is a business continuity issue. This is a corporate governance issue. It's about protecting critical assets. It's about your role as the chief executive officer, making sure that you've gotten the right results. You know, cybersecurity is much too important to leave it to your tech people. And you know, what I'd like to do now is bring up a video from a good friend of mine. I've done a lot of cybersecurity work over the years. For about 10 years, it was actually my major focus at work. And since about the middle 1990s, I've been working with this gentleman, Dan Caprio. And what Dan does is that he does many high-level governmental advisory functions in both the US and Europe. He is a cybersecurity subject matter expert for the European Union. But more importantly, and for your purposes, what Dan does is advise companies of all sizes, especially though mid-level private companies, big companies, the size of people in this room, on what to do if you have an attack, what to do if your data is breached, what to do if your customer list is published on the internet. And he actually has a very interesting program of war games that he does for all types of companies. He does them for governments, he does them for tech companies. And, you know, it would be fun next year, I think, that, you know, in between the fishing and the shooting and the golf, we actually had a cybersecurity war game here so you could figure out how to restart your business if it does have a ransomware attack. So, Cole, could you pick up on the video from Dan Caprio, please? It's only...
I'm Dan Caprio, co-founder of the Providence Group. Yet another sophisticated ransomware attack occurred over the 4th of July. Weevil, the same Russian language group behind the attack on meat processor JBS, posted a $70 million ransomware demand. Ransomware attacks have disrupted organizations around the world, from the Colonial Pipeline to hospitals and banks. The White House issued unprecedented ransomware business guidance in early June. The White House memo was penned by Ann Newberg, Deputy National Security Advisor for Cyber and formerly with NSA. Business executives should immediately convene your senior leadership team to discuss the ransomware threat and review corporate plans and policies to ensure you have the ability to continue or quickly restore operations. Here are 5 best practices from the White House to manage your risk.
Okay, thank you, Cole. We can go back to that lovely slide with the really terrific picture of the Western Mountains, if you like. So anyway, as I was saying, this is a corporate leadership. It's a board-level corporate governance issue. You've got to have a plan. I am going to go through the 5 points that Dan took from Ann Newberger's White House memo and go through the extended recommendations from the Biden administration and how you deal with this. But I do have a little bit of background first, and that is that my bio was the accurate bio. I am the guy that does pipelines and energy industry stuff. But the reality is a little more complicated. I went to Princeton University in the mid-'80s. I was a Japanese and electrical engineering major. I focused more on Japan stuff, which was a big mistake. Jeff Bezos took all the same classes I took, and he's the richest man in the world now, and I'm not. The guy that taught me basic programming in C at Princeton went on to be the Stanford thesis advisor for Sergey Brin and Google. So, you know, I've been sort of like the Forrest Gump of cybersecurity, but in the mid-'90s, I spent much of my time, almost 10 years, working on things pertaining to the emergence of the commercial internet, which would be encryption, security, digital signatures, e-commerce, internet taxation, and things like that. And in fact, at the height of the dot-com boom, Prudential Securities hired me one, to do the tax work, which I really like doing, but really primarily to be their tech policy analyst. And so I was working with Dan and other people following federal government IT, the federal government's information security system. Many of you here may know Ed Yardeni. You may remember his Y2K series. So I was really, really very focused on critical infrastructure going into the early 2000s. But then, of course, there was the dot-com bust. There was the California power crisis. They called me up to New York and said, Jim, we like this cyber stuff you're doing, but there's a power crisis here, and you get a choice. The dot-com boom is over, and you can become an expert on pipelines and power grids, or you can find another job. And I said, I'll take the pipelines and power grids for 200, please. And I basically walked out of the tech space. I've been following it closely. Many of my friends are still deeply involved. And I took the opportunity, actually a wake-up call for me was the hacking of the Colonial Pipeline on May 6th. And I had intended actually to talk about the Colonial hack and what that meant and how to interpret it. I wrote that report, a very long report, 10-page report, in fact, and got a call from David Kotok saying, Jim, I'd love you to come out to Rocky Mountain Economics Summit to talk about this cybersecurity stuff. And that is what I intended to talk about. But that paper describes my experience as a sort of high-tech Rip Van Winkle coming back to the cybersecurity world after about 20 years and discovering that nothing much had changed. All of the same fundamental legal problems were there. All of the same public policy problems were still there. All of the same problems with regard to siloed information and bureaucratic inertia. Everything was still there. It was a disaster. And I was just horrified at what I saw when I came back to see what was going on. And the good news, well, I won't get to good news yet. Here's the bad news. There's been a massive explosion in ransomware. I mean, this is some further background. You know, people remember Matthew Broderick in War Games, and you think of teenagers hacking in their bedroom, or you think of how clever your own kids are with games and IT. No, this is very, very different. There's been an explosion in ransomware in the last 2 years especially. In 2020, there were 65,000 ransomware attacks in the US. 65,000, according to a reputable consulting group, and that's 1 every 8 minutes. So this is a problem. And it's also something that's different from before, because in the past when we've talked about hacking, it had to do with espionage, Chinese stealing secrets, Russian stealing secrets. It was theft, outright theft of technology or commercial secrets, fraud, credit card fraud, in particular banking fraud. A lot of this was stuff that people want to keep off the radar screen, people don't want to talk publicly about. And so you really didn't hear about it very much. But then there was this shift away from theft and fraud and espionage into business disruption. I could even call it public acts of terrorism. Ransomware attacks on very high-profile targets. Maybe you get some money from it, maybe you don't. I really don't understand the commercial reasoning behind ransomware. I'd much rather be involved in credit card fraud myself if I were a bad guy. But you know, the point is that this is exploded. And these ransomware attacks seem to be happening everywhere. But if you look at the pattern is anything but random. Going after JBS, they're going after the food supply. Going after Colonial Pipeline, that's a high-profile example of an attack on the energy economy. The big wave last year was on hospitals and healthcare systems, and we don't hear about it much, but police departments. Police departments and local and municipal governments are getting hacked like crazy. And I'll tell you a story about what's happened to the Metro DC Police Department if we have time in Q&A. So the point is, this has been going on, and it's not an accident, comrade. This is really driven by state-based actors. To some extent, the Chinese have been involved, but their thing is really the espionage and the theft. They've gotten the personnel data for every single government employee. In fact, they've done it twice now. So they're very good at finding out who is working for the U.S. government that might be visiting China. They know a lot about us because of that data that they've stolen. The North Koreans, the Iranians, the Venezuelans, everybody is looking for ways of doing mischief to threaten the U.S. But it's really part of a hybrid war effort from Russia. Russia is the reason why you have all of these mysterious Russian language groups operating out of Russia or the Eastern Bloc. Believe it or not, the U.S. government actually had some of its software made in Belarus. I'll tell you about that in Q&A later. Anyway, it's state-driven, and the idea here is that you want to present a threat, but create also a cloak of deniability. So it looks like there's attacks going everywhere, but we're actually getting clear messages that hospitals, energy infrastructure, the food supply, that the Russians have the ability to target these things. And we're seeing these attacks escalate now because we have a new administration. And the point about presidents, new presidents when they come in, there is nearly always a foreign policy challenge at the beginning of a presidential administration. And obviously, Biden is starting his administration. This is Biden's challenge. I would argue that this is Biden's biggest challenge. And if you watch the way they handled the Colonial Pipeline, or just the efforts they're doing now with the stopransomware.gov website and a lot of one-on-one outreach, they're taking it very, very seriously. They're embarking the same sort of whole-of-government policy that they are using for climate change, for antitrust, for everything else. It's a really impressive whole-of-government strategy for cybersecurity that is detailed in an executive order you can read on the White House website if you like. But what I'm going to do right now, in the 2 minutes I have left, is just go through the 5 points from Ann Neuberger's White House memo. Ann Neuberger is the president's cybersecurity advisor, and here is what she says that you should be doing as a business owner. Now, point 1, Dan said backup on that video. Now, backup doesn't mean run a backup and have it on your system. No. Smart hackers know that they should search your system for anything labeled backup, any file in a backup format, anything that remotely be a backup, and they erase everything. So you've got to be very careful about making sure that your backup is separate from your main system, that it's remote, that it's accessible to you, and also, when was the last time anyone restored a computer from a backup? You ought to do that once in a while. As an executive leader, you should check up with your IT department and see that they have backed up things but also restored them. And you want to make sure that that backup information is offline so that a hacker can't reach it through your main system. That should be pretty obvious. Now, another thing, the second point, update and patch everything, keep your software current. Now, this is a techie thing, I grant you. This is a software thing, I grant you. But as executive leaders, almost like military officers doing inspections in the Army, the lieutenant is not expected to know how to fix the truck, but he does know how to inspect what the sergeant is doing to make sure it's worked. You guys need to make sure that your IT departments are on the ball and are updating everything promptly. Now, the third thing, test your plan. You got to have a plan to figure out what do I do if I'm hacked. And that could include things like going through your systems and figuring out, well, which system do I need for what? Is my email system for internal communication separate from whatever IT systems run my business? Can I segment and compartmentalize these systems? And actually, what do I really need? What would I have to restart right away? In the case of Colonial Pipeline, what was shut down was the company's internal communication system, but they did not know for sure that the system, the SCADA software running the pipeline was operating too, so they had to shut everything down. You just need to sit down and do the thought experiment. Don't get software, don't use a computer, get a pencil and paper and make a checklist of what would I do to establish a backup or to bring my business back up? What systems do I really need? That'll be different for all of you. This is the sort of stuff that my friend Dan does with companies that, let's do the inventory, let's review your policies, practices, and procedures, but more importantly, let's walk you through the war games. If you're a credit card company, you've been breached, one of the war games he does involves having people play the media, having people play the FBI, sometimes other government agencies, and you go through the steps of recovering from a data breach. Or for a smaller business, it might just be making that laundry list, steps 1, 2, 3. How do you come back after you lose control of your major systems? The fourth thing is just testing and validation. Again, executive leadership. Hire a third party to come in and just check your security. It may be that you're missing things. So, as part of your corporate governance, you don't need to do this personally, but you should ask, have we done this year? Have we had a third party test? Does somebody come in to validate our security? And then finally, segmentation is a big, big issue. I mentioned earlier that you want to keep different networks separate. You want to keep critical business functions separated from one another. There's something called a zero trust architecture, and that means that you don't really give a person access to the entire system all at once, which is what typically happens. Every single person on your system should be assumed to be an intruder, so there would be strictly limited access to what goes on. A lot of these hacker attacks are based on really random things like guessing passwords or phishing attacks by email or people inside the company that want to do mischief. China stole lots of U.S. personnel records, but the IRS recently leaked personal tax information. And then we've had stories of, Edward Snowden, Chelsea Manning. If we had time, or if we do have time in Q&A, I'll talk about the federal government's own IT security issues, but a lot of it has to do with not securing the access of individual people at the perimeter. Two-factor authentication is not that difficult to do, and I'd recommend that you do it. So I've tried to be focused on business here. I've tried to keep this at a high level, but you people, as business leaders, need to watch your own backs. No one can really help you. I think that a lot of positive things are beginning to happen in Washington as the Biden administration does roll out an effective national security strategy for the first time. They're trying to make the national security strategy look more like our airline safety strategy, which is important. I could also talk about that in Q&A, but for you, just make that checklist. Who do you call if the event happens? Where is your backup? Is it offline? Have the patches? Is the software current? Have I tested the system? Can I restore a backup? Do I know what I would do? Have somebody else test the system. And then finally start thinking about real access controls inside the system so that somebody can't break in at one point and take the whole thing over. So anyway, thank you very much. Really enjoy coming out here, and this has just been a terrific conference overall.
This on? Okay. Thank you, Jim. Appreciate that. We do have a few minutes for a couple of questions. I wouldn't mind having participants here in the audience ask a question. So do we have a question? Is it Tobin?
Yeah. Jim, just following up on that topic, how should we view the cloud as a help or a hurt in creating preventative measures from ransomware?
Well, I think, am I on?
There you go.
Very good. First step in technology, there is an on-off switch, 1 or 0. You've got to turn it on before it works. I think that you should look at the cloud as a very positive development. It's a way of using outsourced computing services, outsourced software services. You turn over the maintenance and security to someone else. And this might be someone that you can rely on for consistently following security protocols. So on the whole, I think that the cloud is a good thing, but it's only one tool in the toolkit. The federal government is going to be moving to more and more cloud-based systems, more and more standard IT systems with security software that is easier to manage. But yes, you do want to be involved in the cloud. You want to look at cloud applications, but you do obviously want to take into account security.
Thank you. Rob, Brian.
Howard, in your talk, you alluded to sort of the center of your sunflower, if you will. A core competency was your AI platform, which generates financial products. And so when you generate these financial products, in fact, you can generate a very long list of financial products with your engine. How do you discriminate between the products so that you work? You don't have infinite time or infinite money, so that you can focus down on a handful.
Well, let me say that my answer is going to be genericized for normal business owners. The mistake that most people make with AI or things like this is it becomes a fantasy, and they've almost fetishized what they think can happen. And the trick is to focus on a capability, something that you know how to measure. And that measure is probably going to be either efficiency, effectiveness, or certainty. So getting something done in less time, with less effort, or with a higher likelihood of winning. And you want to be able to put points on the board, and you have to know that it's a meaningful points on the board. But that capability is the bait to attract. So if you think about what I'm doing as simplifying, I want to attract a multiplier who's going to distribute it. So it has to, it in a sense has to make money flow, or it shouldn't be considered a core capability. Yeah.
What that actually means is that you have a set of criteria by which you're looking, one of which is the criteria is the money flow. But there are probably other criteria by which you actually discriminate amongst all the product opportunities you can generate.
Yeah, of course. So I don't want to bore people here, but think about Darwin's genus of species, and you've got things like Animalia or Insecta, and then, you know, Animalia, Mammalia, Homo sapien versus Canadensis. That's called a taxonomy. We have a taxonomy of the intellectual shortcuts or the capabilities, and we're constantly ranking them in terms of the importance, the uniqueness. Is it strategic and unique? And there are some of these things that we would never patent because we don't want to disclose. So our patent strategy is to patent things that prevent other people from selling the things that we do, but we don't actually try to patent most of the really core capabilities. I'm trying to answer your question, but I'm also trying to help them. Okay.
We have time for one more question.
Howard, particularly in investing in capital markets, how do you deal with the arms race problem? Because if I'm the best AI, I do very well. If I'm the 20th best, aren't I in trouble?
So there are some really interesting misperceptions in your question. The first is, unlike Muhammad Ali versus Joe Frazier, I don't have to think who's taller, who has a longer reach. I don't actually compete against any of the best quant firms. I just need the public to take the other side of my trade. I only compete with the best quant firms for talent and resources, assets under management, for example, or partnerships. But really, let me answer it a totally different way. Up until about 10 years ago, I would have been the person to tell you, if you have something that works, don't share it, because if too much money or too many people try to do it, it invalidates the technique. It's like statistical arbitrage. It sends a signal to the market, but it collapses quickly. I now believe that the practical realities of time, technology, and competition, especially with AI, make it so that that edge decays faster than ever, and it's decaying faster than you can use it, so it makes sense to sell it, share it, license it, because the only thing that makes sense is not to believe that the edge will be persistent. It's to believe that switching into the next edge is what's important. And so I don't care how quickly it collapses. I care that I have something that's looking at all the different edges to say switch to this, switch to that. And if I help it collapse faster, it's actually a competitive advantage. Measuring whether it's an edge or not is the edge.
Thank you. Due to lack of time, we'll conclude there, but I'd like to give a special thanks to Howard and Jim here for presenting and being with us today, so join with me in giving them a hand.